Everybody, welcome to Grablives podcast. Just to start off with our disclaimer, everything we say and do does not reflect the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. And to start off with our sponsor and team member, Frontline Behavioral Wellness. If you're interested in what Frontline has to offer, they take innovative measures in treating first responders, firefighters, police officers, veterans. And if you're curious about what they do innovative measures to help with PTSD, or formerly known now as PTSI, or post-traumatic stress injury, because it's an injury, not a disorder. So anxiety, depression, cognitive behavioral disorders, they take these measures to treat first responders with EMDR, therapy, individual therapy, group therapy. They have these ways of being able to relate to first responders, and their team is massive. They have their own peer support program and clinicians that are geared to use EMDR and all these different ways to help. So if you're curious, Frontline Behavioral Wellness has a hotline, and they have a 24/7 confidential hotline you can reach if you are a first responder, and that number is 661-877-7241. And Acera is going to be their sister company that's located in Orange County. So if you live out in that area and you're just kind of curious to see how you can get yourself involved, go ahead and reach out to Acera. You can look at acerahealth.com and see what they offer. They take insurance, and if you don't know how you're going to pay, they help you figure that stuff out. So for today's episode, I have my really good friend, Dan Sullivan, who is a really good friend of mine for a very long time. And just over the years of being able to talk to him and just talk over so many aspects of our consciousness and using each other as soundboards. He's such a really good friend and a really good way to see into each other as men, as colleagues in this line of work. So the episode goes over so many different types of conversations, and it was really interesting to just be here today and support this process. But I hope you enjoy listening to this episode. And thank you. Take care. Right, everyone, welcome to Grablives, and thanks for listening. So today I got Dan with me, Dan the man, Dan Sullivan. He's a good friend of mine and an engineer over at City of Los Angeles Fire Department. And today we're gonna kind of just hang out and talk. Dude, I think we've known each other for like 10 years now, something like that.
Yeah, it's been quite a while, actually. Yeah, if you really sit and think about it.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about it today. I was like, dude, I've known Dan for like 10 years. So pretty rad, dude. And I really felt called to talk about growth, as far as what that word means. It's very vague, and Dan and I were talking about it, and it can mean so many different things in your career growth and your personal growth, your emotional growth. And as far as I say emotional growth, meaning like emotional intelligence and what that means to you. So, and even spiritual growth and what that means to each person individually and how that expands. But Dan's going to kind of talk a little bit about where he's at right now in his career and kind of give a kind of introduction of who he is too, because I don't think anyone knows who Dan is. So go ahead, dude.
Yeah, so John, thanks for having me here. Feel very honored. And yeah, my name's Daniel Sullivan. I'm assigned to Fire Station 4 on the B shift as the engineer. And I have 8 going on 9 years in the job. And man, growth has been a huge part of my most recent years, and it's been one of my main purposes on my personal path. And through work, through personal life, man, growth is just kind of an underlying how's it gonna work with like editing and stuff?
We're just going straight through, dude. So just
really?
keep going, man.
Growth. First and foremost, myself, born and raised in this area. My path of growth really began. I actually went off work with an injury, and I have never spent much time by myself. Stillness, in any sort of meditation, very, very little reflection. And I went off with an injury, and I found myself spending that time with myself. I grew up with an older brother, always had roommates, worked in the fire department. My previous assignment, I was at a task force, and I have always been surrounded by others and have just not naturally found that time for myself. And during that time being off, it was right when COVID was going on, having that time alone, I started finding the awareness of what thoughts were going through my head on a regular basis. And I came to find that I was having some pretty dark thoughts during that period of life. And I started recognizing that this wasn't who I am and who I want to be. And I remember feeling scared. I remember feeling that I'm turning into or becoming someone else. And then it hit this point, I was like, okay, am I just going to sit here and dwell and let these thoughts run rampant through my mind, or am I going to do something about it? And that was really a huge moment of my life where I began to explore growth, what we're talking about today. And that growth has come in so many shapes and sizes. It's pretty wild to think that so many different experiences in life can lead to growth. It doesn't just have to be meditation or some sort of extreme experience that's going to lead to, enlightenment, quote unquote. And it can just be the mundane, the day to day, but it's all about awareness and really tuning into how you can react, how you want to respond, and what those thoughts that are running through your mind really mean. And I think one of the first lessons I received was that I have a very huge disconnect with who I am and the relationship with the self. And through life, you passively are going to learn bits and pieces of who you are. And I would like to think it tends to be on the superficial level, but through active and intentional pursuit of growth, you can really start uncovering the deep depths of who we are. And that's the path that I've been on, the last handful of years. And it's been very interesting, and just listening more to myself and finding the relationship, finding the love, and not just loving the good sides of me, but also the unpleasant sides. And how some things on a superficial level seem negative, but truly it's a positive. It's allowed us to be here sitting together today chatting, and it's been very special.
Yeah, dude, I think injuries, when you come to a standstill when you're at home by yourself, we're just always on the go, and we're at work, and we're just doing so much. And if you put a stop to that, a lot of members, speaking to the masses of public safety, we don't know what to do and we start to lose our shit. And, injuries take a lot of patience and require a lot of attentiveness to being by yourself. And I know the first time I was off injury, I had to be alone. I was living alone, and it was hard for me because I was just sitting with my thoughts, same situation. And that's the marker for me where I was able to say no to just that, I guess, I don't know, dude, like a fucking tornado, man. That's what it feels like. And it's because of years of having to do so much that you're finally being able to rest and just to be. And I think, a lot of what you're saying is just to be with oneself is really hard for people. And a lot of people avoid it because they know that when your thoughts keep running through your head, that sometimes you don't like those thoughts. So the thing about that is that there's tools around it. And unless you take the opportunity to do it and spend time with the quality of your being, with your essence of who you are, you're truly not going to be able to know yourself in that highlight or that limelight of truth and discovery and really excavating what that is. It takes a bit of discipline and focus. So the more you take the opportunity to do that, you don't have to go off injury to have that moment with yourself. And you're going to know once you take some quality time with yourself day by day, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe be more transparent with your partner about, hey, I need to decompress. I need 15 minutes to journal, or I need 15 minutes just to be with my thoughts for a second. You'll notice that this practice starts to wind down and it starts to manifest in clarity. And I know through like our career, and this without a doubt, being at busy task forces where you're just training all the time and doing so much busy, call after call after call, then you go to a fire. So there's this moment with yourself to just be in clarity, right? And there's this monotonous part of our job too, where we train, we do things 1,000 times. And the purpose of that is because when we go to a fire, it becomes natural. You don't have to think, it just comes. And you just have to perform. And the best way to relate that is to like martial arts, because the greatest martial artists will actually do the same thing. They do things 1,000 times. And when they are practicing doing things physically in its physical form, they will come to a place where they actually spend more time in meditation than they do their actual physical practice, because they know the power of the mind is more important than anything else. So they know as they can go through this place in battle that the mind's not going to come through and become an obstruction in their place to just be inside that moment of battle or being able to do things in a physical way. So the best way to relate that is like these Shaolin monks, like they just sit in meditation for hours and they do stuff, physically, and they're like acrobats, but at the same time, like they are just masters at what they do. And there's like this really cool quote I heard like recently. It was, you can't be a victim and a master at the same time. And so if you're a victim to your mind, then there's a problem. And it takes a bit of knowing with yourself to get to that point to see, are you a victim to your mind? Sometimes we all are. We all are going to be at that point. But this is a point of body mind mastery now, to where you're going to hear stuff on this podcast. We're saying meditation, and journaling, do your practices. It's the same thing over and over, just like the fire department, because it's the same information, but you need to keep doing it and doing it and doing it to where it becomes natural. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to think about it anymore. So, that's personally, I think that's part of my own growth. And I know to grow into this mental health piece with this epidemic we have, that has to be it. You have to become a master of the mind. And to do that, you have to learn about your thoughts. You have to learn about the way you think, because everyone's has this different blueprint. And if you don't understand your blueprint, how are you supposed to understand yourself when you have to deal with something serious, like a divorce, or you have to deal with an injury, But aside from that, dude, I know you're at Fours, and that's a very interesting place in our department. It's the middle of downtown and stuff. So I'd love for you to talk about that and your part in your career as an engineer, brother.
Yeah. I have been there for about 5 months now, and I'm just kind of getting to the point where I'm settling into the district. Downtown is just a different beast in a different place. Being the engineer, I'm not doing all the hands-on that I used to as a firefighter, where you're getting in there and you're interacting with the community on every run. But now I'm in a place where I have a lot more time to observe, and I see a lot of the things going on in the bigger picture. And it's just an area where there's a condensed amount of mental health challenges and problems. And Fours, one of the challenging things about Fours is we cover Union Station, which is a huge, massive influx of homeless people with all of those psychological challenges, disorders, whatever you want to call it. So it's pretty tough running those calls, because on a regular basis you're interacting with someone on some degree of they're not stable and they're not grounded, and they're, who knows what narrative or thoughts are playing through their mind, because a lot of these people don't even seem like they're on this planet. And we deal with Union Station, and we also deal with the jails. We have 3 of the jails of Los Angeles in our district. We have the county jail, the metropolitan jail, the city jail, and then we have a federal jail. So not only that, we're dealing with people who've had their freedom taken away, which, as we respond to these calls, we're going into these facilities that are secured, massive walls, barbed wire, just kind of like a very heavy, depressing environment. And just like at the fire station, when we have these challenging calls, we kind of put it on each other to bring each other up. Hopefully you have that with your crew. But I'd say just having to see that throughout the days, it definitely takes its toll, and we're so busy that you don't really have time to reflect on it. And there's moments where I have time to myself through creating that time for myself through meditation, whatever it is, and some of that stuff comes up and I'm like, damn, that was pretty heavy, or that was something that I kind of just brushed it off just because we had to go to the next thing. And that kind of leads into a thought I was having just recently was I've had this conversation with a couple people. I was telling my girlfriend Missy, like, hey, I have a hard time feeling stuff, and I forget about the calls that I go on just because we go and go and go. And she brought up a really valid point, was, hey, it's probably a good thing you don't feel everything, especially at this job. And so kind of, a big thing that I'm working on is feeling. I struggle with just sensations and feeling my emotions and all that stuff. And I think that's a pretty common thing in our job. And our job definitely reinforces it, especially with the clientele we deal with on a regular basis and some of the challenges that the culture of the job can have. And on one side, I'm like, dude, if I felt everything from every person in the day, man, we'd be crumbling, falling apart. But it's this protective armor that we wear that prevents us from feeling. But then now, how do you take that off when you go home? Or how do you take that off when you're trying to spend time with family and friends and enjoy and feel something? And it's very interesting because you can't just flip that switch. And at work, I try to come in and just be a positive source for these guys that are on the ambulances, and they're, you know, I don't want to say busier than the engine, but they're definitely dealing with those people more and more, because not only are they responding to them, but they're also transporting to the hospital and having to stay with them the duration of that call, which that's got to be tough. So, you know, I try to come in. One of the big things that I strive to do is be a positive light whenever I come to work. The last thing I want to be or do is make someone else have a bad day. And so just trying to be that supportive member in these especially this assignment, you know. And just, you know, big thing for me is like kind of starting to build camaraderie at this assignment. There's some, but I'm definitely trying to implement that more and more. And I think there's a lot of movement in the department with like saunas and cold plunges. And it's been cool lately. I've been getting a lot of the guys to cold plunge and talk about feeling. It's impossible to not feel a sub 40 degree Fahrenheit cold plunge. And it's been really cool because a lot of the guys, I can see you know, in a general sense, it's fear. You know, they're being in that type of environment is not enjoyable. And I try to challenge them on that, where, you know, they're like, man, it's like a complaining temperament, where I try to step in. I'm like, dude, you are so blessed. You have the opportunity to be at work where you're getting paid, to feel absolutely alive and receive all the healing and health benefits of what this cold plunge has to offer. Man, you know how many people wish they could be you right now? And then after I say that, they kind of just stop complaining, and then they jump in the water. And it's very funny. It's a very entertaining experience to see people who've never done it before, or it's very insightful to see people's perception of discomfort.
For sure.
And there was a point in time for me with cold plunging that I would just do it because I knew I should do it, versus through a lot of growth of life, I very much value what the cold and the element of water provides for us. And I, you know, some days are easier than others, but I try to find that gratitude, and I embrace the discomfort. And now I just sit in that cold plunge and just really just settle in. And next thing I know, 5 minutes passes and get out, and I have this deep red line across my chest from the cold water just sitting there. And then the next person goes, and they're screaming their way through it, you know. And I think talking about growth and talking about, you know, all the different feelings we can have, whether they're good or bad, is you shouldn't be running from them. You should confront them and embrace them. And that's generally, in a very easy way of saying it, the path that I've been on is just not running from things and deepening my ability to feel. And trying to share that in my own way, because a lot of the guys on the job, you can't just come in and have this conversation that we're having right now, because a lot of them aren't maybe ready for it, or they're not going to fully understand, and there needs to be some sort of integration. And we've all had different lives where you're going to see something completely different than how I see it, because of my experiences and yours. And just trying to do what I can within my crew to nudge people in the direction of growth. And I think I think the best thing I can do is be a positive influence and a good role model too.
Yeah, man. I mean, cold plunges are gnarly, dude. I mean, I have a cold plunge at my house, and I try to do it all the time. And I mean, just to do that I mean, it's people, I've heard some different viewpoints on it. I've heard like that it causes stress and you're stressing your body out when you're in that environment. But I mean, the science behind it has been proven that it's reducing inflammation. It reduces cortisol levels in your body. And I think for us, it's a hard reset because we're in this state of hypervigilance and doing. So it actually is a pause to reset the system and reset the nervous system. And I think for us, we're always having cortisol pumped through our bodies. So with cortisol pumping through your body, you're in a state of this high stress, right? Fight or flight. And so when that happens, it really puts a distortion to the hormones. And so a lot of men in our job have low testosterone issues because of lack of sleep, because of working so many days in a row. And what that cortisol level is going to do is when it brings it down, now your hormones can come into balance. There's a freaking trash truck taking the trash out right now. But so when you take the cortisol levels down, now your hormones can come into balance. So your testosterone is going to go up when you do cold plunges. So people who don't see that, they get better sleep. All this shit, right, is really beneficial. So I'm happy to see, guys having a cold plunge and a sauna at the station. I think it's beneficial. If you can't do it during your shift, you at least do it when you get off or before. It's going to reset your system or provide for you those benefits. But I know, dude, with you and kind of explaining a part of our culture, in your position as a driver, as an engineer, the way our culture works in our department is those are considered the locker room leaders per se. And the culture in the firehouse is so valuable because there's a system to it, and the system has been in place for such a long time and it works really well. And this locker room leader, as usually those drivers are kind of spearheading, whatever needs to get done in the station, any conflicts that go on in the station before it gets to the front office. So like, let's say if some guys were arguing about something, they usually go to the locker room leader because that person can kind of hear both sides, kind of teach the culture, teach what's going on, and be able to talk to each person individually before it can manifest as something bigger. And that's generally how this kind of works per se. And obviously there's extremes to that, right? If there's a fight or something like that, it's got to be dealt with. But simple things, there's always conflict because we're living together, in this job, and it's difficult. I think the hardest part about the job is living with these people that we work with all the time, and we're sleeping next to them, So, I mean, I for instance, I would always tell my engineer, hey, I can't sleep next to that person because he's snoring so much. Tell that person to sleep inside of the TV room, and every person would kind of like tell that person, hey, you can't sleep in here because you snore so loud you shake the walls. So that's just like a clear example. Like, things get done in a certain way, and to be a locker room leader, like you're helping some of these younger people that are just barely getting off probation and learning. And so it's nice to have someone who's teaching them the proper etiquette, the proper things, and to push them also to do challenging things. And there's this understanding of something called co-resonance. So what co-resonance is when you are at a state, let's say take like a tuning fork, and each tuning fork operates off a different frequency. If you are having the highest frequency of that tuning fork and it's ringing, all the other tuning forks will actually attune to that highest ringing of that tuning fork. So this co-resonance of what we are, if we are these energetic beings, if you see ourselves like that, we are. I mean, it's been proven. Like, we're an operation of frequency. So if you're operating off this different frequency, people are going to want to attune to you. So that's a very important part of leadership. And the way we go about our life and leading ourselves, not just in our work life, but in our family life. And the way we see ourselves is going to be a very important factor in how we co-resonate with each other in humanity. So I think that was a really interesting way, to improve the morale, is to get people to do a cold plunge, because it is difficult, man. If it's your first time doing a cold plunge, it sucks, dude. You got to just like turn off something in your mind to just sit inside of that discomfort. And obviously there's different practices to get through it. You just do breath work and things like that. But it's super interesting, man, the way, you're setting that up for people, and it's like, what's the most challenging thing for us? I think some people can't handle the heat either, like when we put turnouts on. And I've seen like the buffest dudes, I've heard this term be referred to it as porn muscle, because these guys, dude, they'd be super ripped, like 6-pack abs, just like jacked. They're going through the training in the academy in the drill tower. You put turnouts on them and they can't do it, dude. Like the heat and just the equipment on, that claustrophobic feeling you get when you're just like, your heart's pumping and you're just pushing yourself to the edge. Some people can't do it, man. And I've seen like D1 athletes go through the drill tower and fail because they just can't take it. So there's something about us, and there's like this grit we have that helps us get through it, and that uncomfortability. And the funny thing about that too is like I've seen some tough, heavy dudes like just power through it, like no big deal. And I'm like, whoa, you see this one guy who's got like, he's like 60 pounds overweight, and you got this one guy who's got porn muscle. Like, what's going on here? There's something in this spirit of each person that is able to power through that. They just find that within themselves, and they get through this difficult, arduous process, especially when you're working in the drill tower, right? And that's what this job is designed for, people like that. So now you put all those people in one place to sleep next to each other and have them operate within each other, right? And learn from each other. It's a pretty interesting dynamic. And honestly, I think it's a whole like anthropologic culture. I think anthropologists should study firefighters, like the way they're living, and like, it'd be such a fascinating way to like see like what's going on in these guys, is like their brains and like how they're operating, and I think that's why the culture is like now changing, and there's a bit of, there's a bit of kicking and screaming because it's changing. And I mean, there's like this expression, like, what are the two things that firefighters don't like? It's change and the way things are. It's like, so what do we do? But as far as like growing together though, that's the coolest thing. Like I know at my station, like my group of members at my station, we would grow together. And that was really cool because we would see each other build one another up in a way, and also see the progress in our personal selves and the way we saw ourselves in the career, like getting certified on the engine or on the truck or whatever. And we're always instilling that growth. It's like one of the biggest things we in our department are all on alignment with, is like you want to do as much as you can to promote and instill that in your station, because it's going to better you and enhance your ability in this career. And obviously it's not for everyone to be in that mindset, but in the end, it really empowers each other to build each other up and to learn more, about this career, because there's so much to learn in this career. It's like, it's going to take such a long time until you really know it all, right? But anyways, dude, I know when you told me you went to do like that silent meditation retreat, I was super fascinated about it, and I'm kind of jealous, So if you don't mind kind of talking about that and that experience, man.
Yeah, that was through my learning of myself, recognizing, hey, I don't know myself well. What does it take to get to know somebody? So whether it be you and me and somebody else, how would I develop a relationship with that person? And I think first and foremost, it's spending time with them. So one of the things that came up for me was like, hey, how can I spend time with myself without distraction, without my environment or others, taking me away from learning? And my girlfriend has done it before, and she brought it up to me a long time ago, and it was just a hard yes. Like, hey, this is a part of your path. You want to spend some time with yourself? Do this. And what this was a 10-day silent retreat. And it was a silent meditation retreat. So it's a meditative educational practice that utilizes silence to do its teachings, and then in the teachings is just how to meditate. It's a specific style because there's a lot of means and ways of meditating. And man, it was I went through the entire spectrum of emotions during that experience.
How many days was it again?
It's 10 days.
Holy shit,
10
dude.
days, 100 hours of meditation. It was out in 29 Palms. It's called Vipassana. And Vipassana is worldwide. And I can't remember exactly where it stems from, but it was brought to America, some time ago. And it's pretty wild because it's a free experience. They don't charge you any money, and they feed you they feed you and house you during this experience, and then at the end they just they ask for a donation, and you just give what you can. And it was valuable to not only get a solid meditation practice out of this, but spending that time with myself. And I had things going on with myself that I was struggling to tune into, and it led to some physical responses in my body. And the quick story is I just had this sensation in the base of my throat, and it was like almost a light constriction that would take place. And in the beginning it would just kind of come up here and there, and eventually it started becoming the norm. And it was not the worst thing to ever happen, but it was definitely a huge distraction within life and just uncomfortable. And I think for me, one of the big ongoing thoughts was like, man, is this going to be for the rest of my life? Because it hasn't been there before, and the best way I can explain it is kind of when you get emotionally upset, that airway kind of constricts. It's that same type of sensation. And during that meditation, program, spending that time with myself was extremely valuable. And it's hard to for some person who's got all of the aspects of life going, to stop that and take 10 days and go do something like that. And I'm very grateful that I could make that happen. And there was moments where I was sitting there freaking just bawling my eyes out, and other times when fear was at the forefront of my life, and I was scared that I had opened doors that I didn't even want to. And part of that is that learning and that growth, whereas, hey, I can't run from these things. I have to come face to face with them and really begin to embody what those sensations are, what it feels like, and try to find what that identity is. And I've had moments of that where I would get these extreme sensations of discomfort, and okay, hey, do some breath work, try to breathe through this, get past it. Versus now I'm like, okay, hey, let's sit in this. Let's really feel this and embody it, because this is something's there. And I was told this a long time ago, but is, hey, the best way to get past something is not going around, it's going through it. And that's kind of been the approach that I've taken. And that 10-day silent retreat was very powerful, and it was hard. I tell people, I try not to tell people much about it, because everyone's going to have their own complete unique experience with it. You're going to think you're going crazy a little bit. You're going to think some paranoid thoughts at certain points. You're just sitting there with yourself and your thoughts, and you keep pulling yourself back to presence, and you realize how your mind is, I would say generally for most of the people in this modern society, our minds are untamed animals. And to harness that animal and to have it sit when you want it to sit and have it walk when you want it to walk, that is no easy task. And that experience was one of the first times where I learn to grapple with myself. And that grappling turned to just kind of, at first it was a fight, and then it was just learning to maneuver with myself and how to, that fight turned into a dance, learning what the steps are and how to flow with myself. And, it's tough to maintain that because you think you get it down and then a new aspect of life hits you. And now it's like, okay, I got some other areas that I still need to work on too. And, but yeah, with that experience, I highly encourage anybody who's interested to try something like that. Like I said, it's called Vipassana. And the one thing that I do tell people is don't make a decision if you're going to stay until day 4. Because you're going to question why you're there the first 3 days, and stick it out. I can't tell you all the things that came up during that experience because there was a lot. You just have that time with yourself, and I literally thought about every important person in my life, every important relationship that I've been in, and where I fell short. And one of my biggest takeaways from that experience was how I treat myself. And I'm very, very hard on myself. And it's pretty wild to think about how if I were to treat others the way I treat myself, especially in challenging times, I would not have friends, or they would just be fake friends or whatever, acquaintances. But, it was opening this door to the second door behind the first door of like, okay, hey, I need to get to know myself. The next was like, hey, I need to get to know all the parts of myself. There's more than just one door there. And, spending that time, because without all that time meditating, I would not have gotten there. And, you hear a lot of people talking about, utilizing plant medicines to, skyrocket their growth. But a lot of growth can come from spending some good old time with yourself.
That's crazy, dude. 10 days is a long time, man. I would go travel, be somewhere for 10 days, and I would get, homesick. It's a long, long time, man. But I love how you expressed the mind, as like a wild animal, because the way I would see my mind was like a child. And the way I would have that relationship with my mind is that I'm the parent and the child is my mind, and I'm being able to parent myself in a way to know I'm in charge. You listen to me, and a child will throw fits. Same thing with the mind. It's going to do its thing. And, as soon as I kind of saw that with myself, a lot of things changed for me. I began to be more in the seat of self, which is a great expression of what you see your mind as. You are in the seat of what you see and visualize. You're in the driver's seat, right? And if you can sit in the seat of self and just observe, you realize how almost humorous your mind can be. And if you got to see it like that, you got to have a bit more of a positive way of looking at it, because a thought is just a thought. But do you believe that those thoughts are true is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
So, super fascinating is that like the human senses are so much more profound and precise than science. So when you have these moments to be by yourself and feel the subtlety of everything, you finally get a moment to tap into the superhuman nature, which is funny because like I just saw this documentary called The Search for the Superhumans, and it is crazy, dude. So this spiritual anthropologist, his name's David Verdesi, and he goes and travels all over the world and tries to find the most superhuman people out there from all different religions and cultures and practices. So he'll find these Russians who are psychic, and they can do crazy shit, dude, where they can read a book with a blindfold on. And they'll tape their eyes and then give them a blindfold. They'll just do 3 layers of a blindfold. And this person's reading the book, really slow, but they can read. And so it's bizarre, and not even bizarre. It's almost like these are qualities we all have. You just have to have the tools to tap into them. And the number one thing that he talks about is meditation and learning the silence of the self. And one of the biggest things he talks about is like silence is golden. And in that moment, you're able to discover and find out, what are your gifts, and then you can enhance those, and all those qualities that are dormant, that are not your gifts, will rise up to the surface as well. I mean, he would have this guy, they called him the Leaf Man, and he lives in Indonesia, and he lives by himself. And people will go to him because he has this energetic manifestation of electricity in his body, and he has to touch people with a leaf because electricity will come out of his body, and he could put you in cardiac arrest if he touches you with his bare hand. It's crazy, dude. And this guy goes there because he says that people will visit him because he could heal people with his electricity. So he goes there, and this guy touches him with a leaf, and you can see in the video, like, it shocks him. There's like electrical charge to the leaf. It's crazy, dude. I think it's like a 6-part documentary. And I mean, this guy would basically travel alone for almost like 2 decades to find these people. And some of these people are so hard to find that he would have to go to certain groups of people that would have to send messages to other groups of people to get him to that person.
Whoa. So
like some of the people he sees, I mean, they would also like have in the videos, they would blur out their faces because they didn't want themselves to be seen. So some of these qualities, like, we're losing touch with, and these are all practices that have been done for thousands of years. And the biggest thing I think he talks about in the documentary is that they all have the same like core values and how they're able to obtain this. And one of those main things was meditation and silence. And I know when I was going through my own transformation, silence became a gift after a while. Like, I started to not want any music, no TV in my house. When I come home from work, I don't do anything. I just have silence. And now it's like, when I go to work and I just hear like just industry and traffic and just sirens, I'm just like, damn, dude, like this noise pollution is a real thing. And the distraction it causes can be really like hindrance to our peace. And I think a lot of the anxiety going on with people is that they don't have this noise pollution and distractions, and like, you're on your phone, blue light. It's like all this shit, man. It's like, how are you supposed to find peace? And especially in our job, I mean, when you're hearing a siren 24 hours, if you're working 6 days in a row, I mean, that's really hard to find that peace, So with like, I don't know, dude, it's a balance, right? I think that's the biggest thing for us in our career is finding balance. And I really recommend every single person who's in this type of career, public safety, find some moments of silence. I mean, in the morning when I go to work, I go straight to the handball court after I've done my checkouts and I've done my regular duties. I go straight to the handball court and I sit there in silence for at least 30 minutes to an hour. And I'll also stretch and do certain things. And it's nice. It's really a moment for myself to decompress before I get my day started. And it really changes the spectrum of how I start my day, because I know when I don't have that, I feel different. I don't feel as centered. I don't feel as clear. And it becomes addicting sometimes because you want to feel clarity. And when you do feel clarity, you're like, wow, this feels so fucking good. Mm-hmm. Like, how can I achieve this all the time, And that's when you start transitioning to your meditation practice, and you bring your meditation practice to everyday life. Now, like, that's to more advanced practices, because if you see certain spiritual teachers and like Buddhist monks, they'll be walking and they say walking is a meditation and doing things is a meditation. And it's why they do things with like such precise intention, like pouring tea. If you ever watch like a Japanese person pour tea, it is so precise. It's like an art watching someone in the Japanese culture pouring tea, because they honor the tea ceremony, and it really is beautiful to watch, you know. And when you're around certain people like that, that becomes really addicting too. So that kind of goes into place with like our job too, man. I mean, like we're precise with what we do, you know, so it kind of puts a more attentive detail to the art of our job. You know, you're not going to be so scrambled when you're doing your whatever it is. You know, you're cutting someone out of a car, or you're opening up a building, or you're putting a fire out. You're centered, you're focusing on your breath, and you're focused. And when you're out of that, you feel the difference. I mean, if you play sports, you know, like if you broke up with your girlfriend right before a game, your game is going to be super shitty. You know that for a fact. Yeah. Because the mind is going to do this thing. That's why I was talking about earlier, like if you focus on your mental practice over and over and over, and it becomes like this just repetitive, monotonous behavior, you're going to learn that you're in the moments when something happens, you're going to be clear, you're going to be centered, and you're going to be able to follow through in such a way that you're giving yourself this permission to finally act in a way that's just, I don't know, going into growth, you know. And we go through these moments in our lives that provide us that moment of growth, and you have this decision with yourself to choose, how can I grow from this? Or am I going to be kicking and screaming throughout this process and having my hair pulled while I'm dragging myself across the living room? I mean, you either choose both of those paths. And I think the biggest thing is like, ask yourself, why is this happening for me at this time? And what is the growth and the lesson I am able to learn from it? Because that gives you an opportunity to really not choose to be in that victimhood. You get to actually choose to be in a state of mastery with oneself. But I don't know, man, that documentary, I highly recommend people check that shit out, because that was, I mean, it blew me and Haley away when we were watching it. Just like each episode was like, what? Are you kidding me? This person does this shit? But
what was it called again?
Searching for Superhumans.
Searching for Superhumans.
And I think we just saw another documentary that was really profound. It was called, what was it called, dude? Oh, it's called Dosed. That's what it was called.
Dude, I just saw an ad for it.
Yeah. Good. So this woman, there's two episodes, it's a 2-part docu-series, and there's Dosed 1, Dosed Part 2. And Dosed Part 2 is about this woman. She's like in her 50s, and she gets diagnosed with terminal cancer. And she goes through this process of trying to heal her body, right? She goes through chemo, and she gets surgery done in her colon cancer. And then this cancer spread out through her entire body at that point. And so she was doing end-of-life psilocybin treatment. And so she's like, what? Psilocybin, like magic mushrooms. And it was like a trial run for her. And she was very like skeptical with it. But she ended up going through remission and ended up not dying. She had like 6 months to live.
Whoa.
And she had like 4 years. She's still alive now. But it was super sad. I mean, me and Haley were like, we were emotional in that. Haley was just like bawling. But it was such a beautiful story. And then she was able to, in the psilocybin treatment, she was able to face her death and be okay with it. And that's when she started to heal. She learned how not to fear anymore. And she was able to like walk through her like, with herself and hold her hand as like her child, of her little child self, right? Her inner child. And she would like talk to herself and have these just like profound experiences with that medicine. I just found it to be really interesting. And then the first part of that series, this woman is addicted to heroin, and she goes through a psilocybin treatment to get off heroin. And so she does that and then goes through this escapade of just getting off the drug. It's really rough to watch. And then she goes to do Ibogaine, and then Ibogaine kicks the entire addiction within like a couple days. So it's really fascinating. It's both of those documentaries, the Searching for Superhumans and Dosed, they're independent filmmakers. So you can't get it on Netflix or in these platforms because it's like, actual good information, and it's not going to be like bombarded by bureaucratic bullshit.
Yeah.
But you have to, like, I think it was like $15 for like to pay for like the movie or whatever, the documentary. But yeah, super cool shit, man.
Yeah, I would like to watch that. Yeah, and that kind of makes me, some things were coming up when you were speaking, is like your why. Mm-hmm. And I think that is also something very valuable to consistently check in on. And I guarantee everyone's why throughout life has constantly changed. And going back to taking care of your mental health, whether it's through meditation, taking time for reflection, or just silence, or all the above, it's interesting to come to terms with what our whys are. And it's interesting because I've always known meditation was something that was good for you, or something we should all be doing. But my why in the beginning wasn't very strong. It was just this outside influence said to do it. And I would do it from time to time, but that why was not very strong, and it would cause me to fall short. And then I'd have a new experience of life that would really, cause me to question, okay, what's my why now? And it would be a little bit stronger, and it'd be a little something different, and then I would start pursuing it. But the why is really what I've come to found makes the difference between you being driven, motivated, or just successful with what your endeavor is. And when you see meditation as like something that sounds nice and sounds cool, then you're probably not going to be successful with it, versus understanding that that type of a practice is just like going to the gym, where we're exercising our physical body, we're exercising our mental body. And my whole life, I didn't recognize that there's, whether you call it training or practice or whatever it is, for our minds. And I've always been in tune to exercising my body, but it was having to shift this paradigm within myself of, hey, we're not just here to have this physique or strength or endurance. We also need to be doing that internally. And meditation is one of the practices that exercises it. And where people think like, hey, dude, I do it and it didn't work, but it's just like, you take the metaphor of your physical body, like, does your physical body get better in one go around? It's like, you really don't start seeing results until a month or two. And it's just like with practice. You want to get better at something, you practice. And it's just with our job, we train, and then we see that there's people who have struggle with certain areas. Okay, hey, what do you do when they struggle? You do it more. Mm-hmm. You show them how it's done, and then you let them practice on their own. And then they develop the competency, confidence, and now that why starts shifting maybe into that stronger like version, where we're all going to have different whys. But I think that's a strong place to start, especially when we're speaking on growth. And it's really cool to look back on life and kind of dissect, hey, what were my whys, and why did I do the things that I did? And I think that's an interesting game to play. And then one of the other things I was thinking of when you're speaking was just about kind of leadership. And I think my style of leadership is to lead by example. And I don't normally stand in front of everybody and just start preaching. I kind of am more of a one-on-one person, and I like my reach is kind of in that regards, and leading by example. I think that's one of my greater strengths with work, is I'm kind of showing guys, a healthy approach to work, because I, educate guys. Hey, we should all be aware of this, but just so you know, this job will take a toll on your physical, mental, and spiritual body. And it is vital and crucial that we offset that outside of work. And if we have opportunity within work to do that, and that's through camaraderie, that's through the cold plunge, that's through wellness, and that's through even training. Training doesn't always have to be this bad thing. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of guys have had some sour experiences with training, especially when on the probation. And I can see that there's these wounds there with some of these guys. And I'm trying to reframe that for them where, you know, I love being silly. I'm a very silly person, but I also understand that this job is a very serious job and we need to train in order to perform. And I'm trying to show guys that, you know, this training isn't this thing to be scared of. It's something to look forward to, where we're pushing ourselves or learning new things, which, you know, talking about growth, that's what learning is, all about growth. And, yeah, you know, a lot of the guys on the job just need kind of these little nudges. And I feel like you and me are in positions that can do that. And it's pretty awesome now being in a promoted position. People actually come to me and, you know, ask for advice, personal life and work related. And I'm very grateful to help navigate some of these members through things, because I think I have some valuable experience, and, you know, I am a caring person. So I really, you know, I'm not just preaching because of whatever. It's more of I'm looking out for that individual and hoping the best outcome. And yeah, growth.
Yeah, dude, a part of what you're saying with like the newer culture, right, or newer members, a lot of it is like they feel the pressure, you know, and I think we've all felt that pressure to perform, right, but that you lose a bit of your identity in that process, because you're not doing it for yourself anymore. You're doing it to kind of impress others so they can like you or accept you, because no one wants to be unaccepted inside of a station. But it's hard when you're going through the beginner stage of understanding your confidence level and also your identity and not losing it. Vice versa. It's like going to be tough. And it takes some time and patience with yourself, because there's a lot to learn all at once, and it is required of you to do so. And, you know, everyone has their weaknesses. And I would say the best advice I could give is focus on your weaknesses. Like I'm not the best at, or a long time ago, I was not the best at ropes and knots. I was the worst, dude, but I had the practice. And I know that that was one of my weaknesses, but I would focus on that. So like in the end, it is nice to have someone who's going to be able to teach, you know, and also be a guide by action, because you're right. Like the person who's usually the loudest person in the station is usually not the most like impressive person that's going to be able to teach you. It's usually that quiet person, engineer, that AO that's in the corner. They're usually quiet, and they're just in this confidence with themselves and their comfortability with who they are, because that just kind of shows, you know. And it's really valuable to just have that quiet confidence and to be in that place with yourself. You can use it in your personal life too. You know, you don't need to be just a loudmouth all the time. You just be in your knowing of yourself. And that's one of the biggest things too, when you're expressing the expression of why. You understand like this purpose of who you are. And with that, you're coming into this place into your being of your knowing of yourself. And that is going to correlate to trust. So trust is like this big grand term people say, like trust. But what the fuck does trust mean? Okay, trust is this absolute inner knowing within yourself of whatever it is you go through in your life. And you're going to be able to manifest that knowing into everything you go through in your life without question. And if you can think about anything in your life, give yourself 3 options or 3 things that you know for a fact. And when you bring that knowing around those 3 things, try to manifest that within yourself, within your consciousness, within the heart of yourself. Because when you go into your knowing, and if you're not knowing, you're uncertain, then that's an issue. And I think people walk around with a lot of chronic uncertainty, and that's not going to be a life of empowerment. That's going to be a life of a lot of distortion. You're going to second guess yourself. Don't second guess yourself. Do it, and do it with a full heart. And when you're teaching like a probationary member or a rookie, like, you want them to have this confidence, and you're sitting on the edge of your seat, like, come on, man, I know you can do it. In your head, you're saying that, right? And you're like, just be confident, man. You know all this information, just do it. Mm-hmm. And there's like this, you're just like pussyfooting around it, like, just fucking do it, man. And you're just waiting until that rookie gets to that point. You're like, oh man, you're just internally like kind of congratulating that person, like, you really did it, and I've always believed in you. And it's just because there's so much doubt, like, as a rookie, because you're a beginner, you don't know what the fuck to do. So you're just trying to figure it out. And once you progress in this career, like, you start to really have that, and like, you start to really be comfortable in your skin, and then use that and use your qualities in other ways. And that's what's really cool about this career, is you meet those people, and those are the true leaders and what we do. And it's really rad to find those people, because, I have so many handful of people I can just like name off, that have really shown me so much of that. And it's shown me how to be that myself. And I think with that, that's true leadership. And that's true work in what we do in this business. And it's really profound. But I want to say your personal life too is a really reflection of that as well. I think these legends are per se, like, we hold them on the pedestal, but when you look at their personal life, like, what the fuck, man? You got like 4 divorces, like, you're drinking heavily on all the time. It's like, what the fuck, dude? Like, and you got a big fat gut. You know what I mean? Like, that to me is not true leadership. I don't respect that. And that's just me being honest. Like, if someone's coming over to me and telling me I got to do better at my job, and they got a big, huge fat gut, it's like, dude, you don't exercise, you don't do anything for wellness, and you're just like telling me what I have to do? Fuck that. And I think that was like a bit of my anarchy when I was younger on the job. I would act like that, But in the end, I have to really respect everyone and really see everyone's side of everything too. But your personal life is a big part, and you got to really put some effort into your personal life too. And I think I lost touch with my personal life for a while until I came to a standstill, and I had to focus on that. And a big part of it was my family, and focusing on my family and making sure that was the main focal point. And to pivot off of that, like, my mental capacity to process things was a big part of that too. And even processing like calls I go on, or processing a shift where I got my teeth kicked in. Like, I just have to make sure I had this like decompression, and I had this radar of like myself and how I feel when I come off a shift. And you were talking about earlier how just coming home and not feeling anything, and you're just numb. I think a lot of everyone feels that. And there has to be something to get around that, because I do all these things. I do cold plunges, I do sauna, yoga, like all these fucking things, and I still feel it, dude. Like, it's hard to get around that. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things I can get a hard reset is a cold plunge to getting off that numbness feeling, because that shit does not feel good. If you start feeling that for a long period of time, you get burnt out straight up. Another thing is like breath work, like true breath work practice. If you can go on like YouTube, you can YouTube Wim Hof, like do like 5-10 minutes of like a breathing exercise. It can get you right out of that funk. Mm-hmm. And there's an ancient part of this practice of breathing that is able to chemically just move things through your body. Like the pH balance in your blood will change after a breathwork practice. So some of these things that we need for sure, because it's going to be a great thing to have in your tool belt when your feeling's fucking numb, dude. Because it's not going to last very long. And if you're going to feel numb, that leads to a lot of illness, and you start to get like just physically ill if you start doing that to yourself. And that's why I think a lot of people drink, because it gets you off of that numbness feeling. I guess more so in a place of like, you can kind of be expressive, and pull yourself out of that funk.
Yeah.
But you're still numbing yourself with alcohol. So it's not a great segue when you're getting off work, and not to judge anyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just one of those methods of how can I feel? Because we want to, right? We want to not have those bad thoughts, and we want to feel good. And I think, unfortunately, historically, the avenue that a lot of guys took on the job was to drink. And my dad was on the job, and I grew up in a pretty traditional household. And my dad would come home, first thing he would do is crack a beer and start doing work around the house. And I found myself doing that when I was, a couple years on the job. I would come home, knock out all my errands, and I'd just start drinking. And I was drinking like heavy IPAs. And after a couple of years of doing that, I was, showing up to work. I was like, man, I feel like shit. I was like, dude, I think I got a bad pillow or something. And it's like, after time, I was like, no, it's not the pillows. It's not the sheets. It's not anything else. It was the alcohol, and it's kind of burning the wick at one end. And I'm also,
right,
just moving constantly in my personal life where I was burning at both ends, which, led to some burnout. And you're just kind of putting a Band-Aid on something, a wound that's not going to heal with a Band-Aid, right? And it's kind of like that approach of, hey, you're not going to get past this by going around it and putting a Band-Aid on it. You're going to get past this by going through it. And big believer of that. Oh man, I was going to say something about something you're saying.
Well, big fat guts.
Oh. You're talking about cold plunge, and then what was the part after that?
I said a lot of stuff, dude. Well, gut health is a big one too, right?
Gut health is very huge. Man, it was you're talking about coming home and not feeling. And that's what I was going to say is I agree, breath work is a very, very valuable tool. And for anyone who really wants to experience the true power of breath work, do 5 rounds of Wim Hof breathing. You can go on YouTube and do the guided one. And I say this from personal experience because I, not long ago, did a Wim Hof class. I did it with Trevor.
Oh, nice.
And it was cool because I'd done this Wim Hof, on and off for a couple of years, actually. But I've only done 3 rounds or so, and that was always the extent of the experience. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, I feel, alive. I feel my fingertips tingling. I feel all these things. And then it was a competition for me because you do breath holds. Now I'm always like, okay, I gotta do more. I gotta do more. But we did this class, and, being in that type of environment where you feel safe because there's an instructor there who's, makes you feel he's watching out for you. He's guiding you through it. So you feel that safe container. And we ended up doing 5 rounds, which I had never done before. And at the end of 5 rounds, holy shit, like I felt like someone found this switch in my body and just clicked it on, and my whole body was vibrating. It was, you're talking about a hard reset. That was a hard reset. And it's the same thing that you said with cold plunge. You get in there, you might find God, and it's those experiences that really can bring you down to earth. And I'd say for a lot of guys on our job is we don't always know, like, that's what we need. And that's where it's like, developing that relationship with yourself where you can come home from work and, hey, take a second, like, hey, what am I feeling? And what are my options? What do I need and what are my options? Hey, what are my tools available? And, start developing your healthy practices to allow you to come home and be your true self. and and the goal is to be your true self at all times. It's just like kind of what you're saying before, especially when we're on probation. I'm a big believer, and I've seen it a lot. We all just want it to be accepted, and this culture is very hard to learn on top of the job itself, because there's so many traditions and old school like temperaments and mentalities that are involved in it. And it's hard as a young, impressionable person to navigate through that and learn and be yourself, because you're just trying to be the person that you think everyone else wants you to be so you can fit in. And that's a hard place to be in, because when you come to work trying to be someone else, it is exhausting. And you're wearing a mask, and I appreciate when people can be genuine. And I think, we've talked about this through our department forever, like, oh, diversity, it's a strength. And I do agree with that, but we need to also really encourage it. And I think if everyone could kind of not pretend, and we would get the most out of people, because now you're not thinking of all the things you're supposed to be and supposed to be doing. Yeah, all the important job related things, but the personality stuff, now it opens your door to presence and contributing to what the work is going to be. Because like you said, we don't just work together, we live together, we eat together, we sleep together. And I think it needs to be more encouraged in our job for sure.
Yeah, like your authentic self holds this value to it. And that's why we're speaking on this identity of who you are, and in the why of who you think you are, and asking yourself these things, because you're going to get deeper into those things. Because, at the beginning of that documentary I was telling you about, the Searching for Superhumans, he starts with the beginning of the documentary saying, who are you? Do you know? And it's interesting because, I've asked myself that question. And I've done a meditation practice where you prompt that question and you go into the meditation. And it's really, really bizarre what happens, because once you stop at your name, what's next? I'm a firefighter. Okay, what's next? All right, you go deeper. And it's pretty interesting the way that that's set up, right? And, you really find out the why when you go into a practice like that. And, you can go into a journal prompt in that way too. Ask yourself, who are you? Do you know? And it really gives this perspective of what do you believe, who you are, and how you've come to be that person. And you really start to find out so much, how you were raised, and the values that were in place, with the values you didn't have that you had to learn outside of being raised. And their friend life, your friends, misery likes company, right? You've had bad friends that have caused bad behavior in your life, and you might still have them now, those same behaviors. So when you start to just really chip away at this stuff, you find out so much. And it really takes 10, 15 minutes. Give yourself a week, 10 minutes a day of asking yourself that question. You really find out a lot. And you start realizing and second guessing so much in your life, where you start becoming more of a philosopher of your own self by just asking yourself two questions. And I know in that documentary, there is this temple in Indonesia where it's designed to have this reflection of human consciousness, and it's 4 or 5 layers, and at the outer layer, it's the identity of who you think you are, these walls that are built. In the internal, it's your feelings that are built up. And then the inside, the core, it gets deeper and deeper until a soul level is reached. And that's at the center of the self, when you're reaching that soul level. And it looks like an Aldean cross. I don't know if anyone's ever seen that, or it almost looks like a Celtic cross. It's got 4 sides, but 4 inner sides going towards the center, almost like in a pyramid way of how it looks. But it was interesting the way, this culture had created a temple designed to reflect human consciousness like that. I just found it really, really interesting the way it was set up that way. But, I think after I started to study my own consciousness, I became more of like, I almost got like jumped into a rabbit hole of consciousness, and studying more different people and practices who study consciousness, and this has like been the number one key point since the dawn of time to study. And these ancient practices have figured out how to move past it to enlightenment. And that's what some of these religions try to seek, right? Like, Christianity tries to find heaven, and like the Buddhism tries to find enlightenment, and everyone's trying to obtain this. And so I think part of like spiritual growth, you can get lost in that, and you can get addicted to the spiritual growth and lose sight on this physical form of which you're supposed to be grounded into to inhabit those spiritual practices, to bring into this body, because this is the vehicle what we drive. So if you can do that, you can really find ways of learning about yourself, and I truly believe those moments with yourself in silence are the number one key points of your growth and like rapid evolution. I mean, you think about like these ancient teachers, like even Jesus or the Buddha. Like Jesus was walking in by himself for 40 days and 40 nights in the desert, and that was like a portion of his evolution right before he was crucified. Right, that's like the story. And he would contemplate just in silence. And the Buddha, same thing. He was the Bodhisattva, the Buddha. There's many Buddhas, but one of the main Buddhas had gone into isolation for 7 years. And in those 7 years, he was by himself in isolation. And at the end of those 7 years, he was like, fuck this, I'm done. And at that point, he found enlightenment. And that was like that's kind of like the whole story is like at the very end, towards the very end, he found it because he gave up, he surrendered, and that was the key point. And that was kind of like the evolution of the Buddha. And pretty interesting the way I've seen myself, because I started to study so many different religions and practices and ancient cultures, and like they all have this same like key point to everything they are desiring to seek, and it's peace, inner peace. And everyone wants that, and they all lead to the same truth if you look at it that way, and if you extract yourself from your own belief systems and to see it that way. There's like this state of oneness, and that is unification as well, and bringing balance and harmony and learning the laws of nature and universal law. Like these things you cannot escape from. And I think after all of my studies with those things, I really learned so much, and I still learn all the time. I'm reading different books. I mean, right now I'm reading The Unfettered Mind. It's like he's a master swordsman, the ancient swordsman of samurai practice. So like the translation is from like 4,000 years of like Japanese language translated in English. And it's so specific the way this guy like learns how to master the mind. And this ancient swordsman, he goes into the mind first before anything else. And he teaches about that to his students. And it's like this self-mastery of the mind. And he says, before you think when a sword is swinging at you, you're too late already. So it's kind of like this whole point of like being almost like where your mind is blank. And when you're at peace, that's when you have the biggest clarity, and you're able to act out of impulse and trust in your body in this way of knowing. So that was a fucking rant, dude. I don't know what happened, where I went with that, but I think the thing with this is the power of the mind. We are in this capacity as tactical athletes, because that's what we are. And if we see ourselves as warriors, going into a big, huge fire, we have to go into this mentality. We have to be clear and mastering of our minds. And we should do that more and more and more and keep improving this, because now if we do that, we won't have this epidemic with mental issues, with anxiety, depression, PTSD, or they call it post-traumatic injury now. It's not necessarily a disorder, it's an injury. And so there's tools now to even move past injuries like that with mental capacities. You have EMDR, you have hypnosis, you have psychoactive therapy, I think it's what it's called. And you have plant medicines that are coming out through the woodwork that's healing people in and out. Psychedelics, or this quotation on big broad term of psychedelics, which is helping people move past trauma. These things are coming to the forefront because they're helping people move past the blockages and the obstructions that have impeded their growth. So I think with everything kind of moving in that direction, I think the government's going to have to step aside at some point. All of the conservatism is going to have to step aside because of limiting belief systems. Everyone's going to have to move over to have these things come forward because it's helping people. I don't know, man. What do you think?
I think we're all scrambling for tools, and it's, one sense it sucks because we're behind the ball, but it's on the other side, it's like, hey, it's impressive to see the effort and energy getting put into what tools are out there and what can they do for us. And I'm very excited to see what is going to come of it. The evolution of medicine and technique and all these things that can be utilized to better ourselves. And I have this metaphor that I like to hang on to that it's kind of come up. Just this general topic is we're all cups, and it's a matter of how full our cup is. And so taking time to learn what kind of cup you are and what types of things in your life are going to fill your cup to allow you to be the fullest, best person you possibly can. And hopefully when you're this overflowing cup, you have more to give to others. You're this bountiful amount of source and love and all the other positive things. And I think it's everyone's own responsibility to find out what it is to fill your own cup. And I've had this conversation with others. I was like, oh no, that's selfish, man. You filling your own cup. But it in the big scheme of things, I don't see it as being selfish at all. Because if I'm running around with an empty cup and I'm trying to help others, I'm just creating a liability and a hazard, versus take myself as my own responsibility, and I learn what that is and how to come into the world with more to give. That's just going to make it all smoother. And everything what you were just saying is those tools. Hey, take advantage of what resources you have, the valuable people in your life, and the programs, medicines, practices, all the above, and hopefully learn to step in the world as your best self, true self, and give as much as you can. Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't show up in my relationships when I'm empty. And if I do that, and I have nothing else to give, then what good does it do? I'm actually hurting more than I am because I'm not giving my fullest self. Yeah. So if I give more compassion for myself to instill the quality of my radar of where I'm at, then I can be more attuned to what I have to offer. And that it's not, it just takes practice and more like a general assessment with yourself. And I know that it's just not really taught very often. We're always on the go, especially in our culture, and being in the area we live in is the same thing. People are struggling more and more with mental health issues, not just in our line of work, but all over the place, because there's this push to always be like successful or whatever, and people are losing touch with the self and losing insight on how to make a general assessment. And I think you don't need to go to therapy to learn that. You can just do it yourself. And it just takes a bit more of a discipline and grit to find how that serves you. And over a period of time, like, you're going to learn how that works. And it's not that hard. It just takes time, a lot of patience, focus, discipline. And you find the center. And when you're finding the center, you're like, whoa, it actually is not that hard. But when you're in the center, you know what that feels like. And it feels fucking good. You're really able to have just a bit more of like this inner sense with yourself of like, wow, I can show up for much more when I'm in this place. And everything's in flux. Like, everything is not static. So when things are becoming chaotic, in your mind there's a lot of chaos. So now it takes time to just, okay, I need some time to myself when I get off work. And with yourself, if you keep doing these practices of just giving yourself contemplation, assessment, and when you're driving home from a long shift, do that with yourself. And you might seem insane when you start talking to yourself, but that's when a lot of clarity comes through, and you start talking to yourself out loud. It came to a point where I was in my own process where I was just like having intrusive thoughts, and I was just like, no, I'm not going to let it happen. I am the driver of my consciousness. I'm not going to allow this to come through my consciousness. I'm in control. And I had to talk to myself out loud to get there. And it seemed fucking crazy. If someone was driving next to me and they started looking at me, they probably think I was talking on the phone, but dude, I had to do that. I mean, it was a moment where I was able to progress with myself and learn, like, you are the creator of your consciousness and your reality. And as a creator, I'm working in tandem with the great creator, and I'm able to do so. But it took a lot of understanding with myself to get there. And it wasn't easy. I had to shed all the emotional debris and all of the intrusive thoughts and bamboozled imposter syndromes I had to work through, It takes time, for sure. But if everyone can get to that point, it takes also a community of people to encourage each other to do so. And I hope when people listen to this podcast, they are inspired to do that, because this whole podcast started with guys in our department committing suicide, and we had to do something about it, and talk about all this shit, and not everyone's is dealing with this together. We just choose different pathways of dealing with it, but you don't have to deal with it any longer. It doesn't have to be a lifetime of healing. You can heal right now. But if you have to get through some stuff and go through the things you were failing to face in your life, it's time to do it now. And it's time to move past it. And now you can empower yourself to empower others. What do you think, Dan the Man?
Yeah, I think it kind of plays into everything we're already saying and speaking on. There's no time like now to start, and you keep putting it off, you're not going to go anywhere. It's coming to a place where taking that step, and it might not be in the right direction. It might not be using that practice that's going to be the one you need, but at least you've taken that step. And it's like, oh man, I've heard this good metaphor. It was, you have feet and you have your eyes, and you need your eyes to find the path, but you need your feet to walk it. And in the beginning of a lot of this stuff, you don't have the eyes because you don't know exactly what you're looking for and where to go. But the most important thing are your feet and taking those steps. And it's just as powerful to find the thing that doesn't work than the thing that does. And taking that leap, I know it's not always easy, but asking yourself that why, spending some time, and I think growth is an essential part of life, and to pursue it is going to not only fill your cup, but fill the cup of those that are in your circle. And you're just going to be such a positive influence on the world, and there's so much out there that's not for everybody. I've heard of plenty of people going to therapy and like, oh, dude, therapy is not for me. And, but then I'll go and have a conversation with this person, and it's like therapy. You have a person, and it's kind of like what we have when we talk to each other. We're expressing emotions. And I think that's generally what therapy is getting a lot of the thought and emotion out of our minds and bringing it out into the world. And in the beginning, for me, it was very powerful to recognize and reflect on, like, oh shit, I said that. But it's like that's been on repeat in my mind, versus now I'm coming and putting those words from thought to reality is powerful. And now you can sit and grasp that and sit with that and reflect on it, versus having those thoughts just keep running. It comes and goes, versus now it's there, it's out there. And there's a lot of avenues, and there's so many resources out there. And I think you're a great resource, and just having this platform is creating a lot of awareness, and having people know that there is a path and there is a direction, or there is multiple directions, and feeling more comfortable with making that leap because others have. And that's a very very powerful place.
Yeah, I think if you can find someone you can confine in, and have a good conversation about whatever is going on in your life, and just having like a lot of trust with that person too. That requires a lot of it, but emotions are not bad. I think as a male, we have been taught that emotions are weak, and I was always taught that. My dad never was giving me the capability to express my emotions growing up, and even being in this field of work for so long, like I didn't know how to use that, that emotional intelligence. And even that word, you get taught in the beginning of the academy or the drill tower about emotional intelligence. And then after, you don't learn anything about it. So what the fuck is going on?
What was that?
Yeah.
Magic trick.
It's an intelligence, if you think about it. Emotions are the key of discovering what's going on. Your emotions are there for a reason. So if it's a reaction, that's considered an emotion as well. Okay, so if you think about it, you're reacting with anger. Okay, well, the anger is teaching you something. It's showing you what is your trigger point. Okay, what button was pushed. Go to the button. Go to the hard wiring behind that casing of the button and find out what the trigger was. So the emotions are showing you. It's just a veil to show what's underneath it. That's all it is. And we have an emotional body. Energetically, by ancient teachings and practices, there is this portion of us that is an emotional body. And if you stuff those emotions down there, there's a blockage that it'll begin to manifest and create. And a lot of times illnesses and disease will create itself from that blocked emotion. So a lot of times, I'm just saying from what I've learned is that a lot of times disease comes from that, like cancer. It's like been referred to as been repressed anger that's been just crystallized into tumors because you've stuffed that anger down, and underneath that anger is grief. So in your life, and you've had to deal with something, you've not faced it, a lot of times it'll become that. Mm-hmm. So like there's an important factor with emotions to let them out. Like anger is not a bad emotion. It's a beautiful emotion, but don't stuff it. Let it out. You know, we always tell Paisley, Haley's 9-year-old daughter, to scream in a pillow. Have a fit. Let it out. Like it's important to do that. So if you need to go to your dorm and scream in your pillow, fucking do it. But it's like, you know, I know I'm not really an angry person, but I used to be as a kid. And after I started to work with myself, I started to realize like my inner child self is actually angry and is suppressing anger. And that was a bit of a work I had to do with myself. Is I had to go dig deep and find out what that anger was, you know. And it was just deep, deep sorrow with my wounds that I carried. And I had to really, really find and process that. And it was a huge point in my I guess trajectory of myself and my process, because I really had to dig deep for that one. But it took me a while to get there. I mean, I'm still processing it now, you know? And that's the cool thing now is like, I'm still working with myself and learning about myself to where, you know, I can come on here and be vulnerable about it and talk about it and express that, you know, it's not weak. It's actually, it's a release and freedom, because I took the courage to go there. And it honestly was not easy to even get to that point of going to deep sorrow and processing what that felt like. It's just like, it's like when you're unwrapping a wound, you know, that's the hardest part. And to heal a wound is like, you think about it, like wounds are terrible. You know what I mean? They can seep deep, and then if it seeps really deep, it could cause a systemic flare-up of just your body not being able to function anymore, you know? And you have to go into your emotional wounds and learn about them, because it will eat you alive if you don't want to go in there. It hurts at first, but over time, after tending to that wound, it will start to get better. And after it gets better, it will still have a scar, you know, but that doesn't mean that I don't know, there's this word called the samskara. It's a Sanskrit word referring to the inner wounds we carry, you know, these scars. And they're deep, you know, but it's also nice to embrace the scars and know that those scars made you who you are today. And to fully captivate like that embracing of that is like, I don't know, that's who we are as humans, you know?
Yeah, I think what was coming up for me in that was I just had a conversation with a buddy about the journey and the destination. And, you know, he was talking about the journey, the destination, and focusing on the destination. And I was like, dude, you look back on any time you ever wanted to accomplish something, this and that, and it was those times up to the destination, that everything that leads up to that point, when you accumulate the scars, you know, and you go through the hard times, the good times, the challenging moments, that's what shapes what that destination is. That destination is just kind of like that little picture, or that, you know, the little golden star you get. But it's like, hey, no, like all the growth happened in the journey. Like the destination had nothing to do with who I became. It was just a point or a moment. But all these things that we experience truly have shaped who we became, or becoming who we've been. But yeah, and to go back into some of those challenging moments where we still have some sort of wound, or it's a sensitive place, whatever you want to call it, it's not easy. And kind of some of the things I've been exploring this last, 6 months or so is shadow work, right? Where, there's this shadow version of yourself, which, it's kind of the dark places of your consciousness that where, in life things happen that you push down. And that was kind of some of the things you're saying, where we're really good at bottling all this stuff up and we push it down. And we kind of think it's gone, but it's leaving its mark. And not to reference too much at this moment, but I'm reading The Body Keeps the Score right now.
Nice.
And it's for my own personal experiences that I was talking about earlier, that throat sensation, it was, first I had that sensation. I was like, I don't like this. I don't want it. I was trying to push it down, but it was a physical form now versus, hey, what is causing this? Where is this coming from? What are the roots of this? What's the underlying, reason for having that sensation? And through my work, and Vipassana was a big part of that, and just spending that time developing the relationship, I had an unworthy narrative that I would constantly tell myself, and I would naturally take certain things on as a big issue, even though it wasn't. And I'm really good at taking on other people's problems as my own, which I'm trying to balance that out as well. But yeah, not only is it you got to figure out who you are, but then it's at a certain point getting back and okay, hey, how can I repair or be gentle with or heal? It's really just healing, I guess, but what does that look like? And yeah, not easy.
Yeah, shadow work is not easy, but we maybe did a whole episode on shadow work, and to kind of give a bit more insight on shadow work, and a lot of it is core wounds. There's a list of core wounds you can look up online and find out, what are your core wounds, and that's just a portion of what shadow work is. It's everything you avoid necessarily. Really, it's why are you avoiding that? Your shadow will come back at you and find you and knock at your door because you've avoided it. And it's this part that's just aching to be seen. And once you shine light on it, it doesn't become a shadow any longer. You just know that it's a part of you, and you learn to have this relationship with that part of yourself. And shadow work was coined by Carl Jung, who is this, I think he's a Dutch psychiatrist, but he goes into how important shadow work is and how humanity has avoided shadow work for such a long time. And as he started working with his clients and his patients, he started seeing the rapid evolution of his clients after he's worked with the shadow of who they are. And I think with a lot of this stuff, there's just, every person is unique, and so unique that we are at a soul level, this imprint of a snowflake. There's not one snowflake that is ever the same, and we are a manifestation of that same reflection. And just through our experiences in life, no one has seen the same things our eyes have seen and that our hearts have felt and experienced. And that is true to every person, but you have to honor each person and respect one another that's the case. And each person has this quality to find how to get through it. And with these hardships comes ease. And when you go through the hardships, it's you're gonna find out how powerful you are in those hardships. And after you realize you've created this for yourself to learn, and the lesson is going to keep repeating itself over and over and over until you've got it. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's how it works. But give yourself the opportunity to understand that is how it works. Okay, it's just how universal laws are operating in this quantum field of expansion reality, because we are always wanting to grow in that manner. So if you want to grow with ease, get through the hardships first, and then you can give yourself permission to now be in this state of being able to learn lessons in an easier manner. So I know, like, with universal laws, one of those universal laws is universal law of sovereignty. And to understand that there's a lot to go into sovereignty and understanding, like, your integrity. And the integral self means bringing something into whole, to integrate and to be in a whole manner. And I know from, like, in East Africa, their culture, they teach that a person is not good or bad. A person is a whole. And they teach that a person is usually a day person or a night person, light and darkness. And they also say you have to be both of those to become whole. And their culture integrates what this means. And so they will actually put a young boy in the darkness to go hunt by himself. That is his way of being implemented into the tribe. And that is just how they learn. That's how they just were working with natural law, that going into the darkness was actually the point of growth for that young man. And maturity was rapid for that young man. It's his initiation and his right going into this tribe and learning. As he goes into the darkness, he realizes he can see clearer the moment he gives himself the opportunity to be in the darkness by himself, because his senses become clearer. His capacity to see clear is there when he's by himself. And these qualities and these teachings are, like, they've been around for such a long time, but our culture is just, like, so distracted, and not realizing the easiness to go into these states, because we're given everything so easily, right? I mean, shit, I don't know if I was like a hunter, like, how that manifests, but you're being taught by people who've been taught by their ancestors, right? And, like, we don't get those teachings from our lineage and our ancestors like how we used to. Mm-hmm. We're learning through the internet. You know what I mean? It's crazy, but I love how you talk about the journey, man, because that's what it's all about. It truly is. And like, that destination, I mean, when you get there, it's like, what's next? We want challenges, especially as firefighters. We're always looking for a challenge. And, I challenge you, sit in some silence, man. Dan's did it for 10 days. That's remarkable, dude. And when you told me that, dude, I was, like, so interested in how you did that. And, like, your story is, like, super interesting, the way you start almost going crazy, because your mind starts fucking with you,
Yeah. Yeah. Talking about kind of being a different person at work and changing this and that, I would say I wasn't my authentic self at work. A lot of the time, my first handful of years in the job, I was just trying to be that person. And, as of late, I'm just like, dude, I'm not going to let that dictate who I am and when I am. I'm just going to be my authentic self. And I remember at lineup, my captain asked, like, hey, anybody do anything fun over the 4-day or eventful? Raised my hand. I was like, yeah, I did a 10-day silent retreat. And, like, everyone was just like, what the? And, most people thought it was very strange. And, but then it was cool because, once that dust settles and you get certain people and the environment kind of changes a bit, you figure out who's actually intrigued. And I had people come up to me like, hey man, what was that? And I've noticed I get a lot of that in this job. Like, I've always kind of been a little bit of the odd one out. I decided to start eating vegan I did that for about 2 years on the job, and I'm very grateful that I didn't have to do that starting the job, because that would have been extra tough. It was nice because I started it having established myself on my shift and with my crew, but it was tough because the eating is such a big part of our camaraderie and community. Whereas you come sit down, one person cooked this meal for all of us to share and eat together as a company and as a station. And eventually it got to this point where there was a lot of, or the entire meal was not, I wasn't able to eat it. So I started bringing my own food into work, and all these things, like just kind of being the weirdo eating, we were eating together, but it felt like it's some of the sense like eating by myself, and some guys were bothered by it. And but then on that flip side, I had guys that would come up to me one-on-one, obviously not in front of a large group, like, hey man, dude, I started doing a plant-based day once a week with my family, and yeah. And it's just like kind of cool to see, a lot of guys aren't willing to step into that authenticity in front of the whole, in front of that type of environment. But it was cool to see the reach that you can have being that person. And not everyone's comfortable with that expression, but, it was just, I remember I got an evaluation, and it was a positive evaluation. At the end, my captain told me that I was eclectic. And I was like, I think that's a good thing, and he's like, I like you, you're eclectic. And I was like, oh, thanks. But yeah, and just everything we're learning, there's such big shifts in general health, mental health, physical health, and talking about growth. My big growth is not only just feeling emotions and connecting with myself, but it's like feeling my physical body, and I'm under the big belief that our bodies are instruments, and yeah, they are direct reflection of our mental health too, because talking about sanskaras, the body keeps a score. It's all this evidence that our body is a physical representation of that mental health. And like, I think is it pronounced sanskara?
Samskara, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So
I know it's Sanskrit, so I don't really know how to pronounce it, but it's spelled that way.
They talk about that in that meditation class, and how there's these strings from our consciousness attached to like the entire threading of the body. And over time, as we're first brought into this world, we're this loose, fluid life forms. But as you go through different experiences, having different variations of trauma, those threads just start tightening. And it's like me, like I'm learning where I have all this tension in my body. It's like, did I have that tension when I was born? No, like that all is stemmed and developed over time through experience. And yeah, it's a lot. A lot of rambling.
That's good, man.
Yeah.
No, I think going through my own physical injuries and realizing I was so tense for a long time, and we teach like this mental toughness, but that mental toughness is like good for certain things. And that's why this blanketed term of balance is really important, because mental toughness is good when you're in a fire and you got to pull out that warrior spirit to push yourself to the limit. Mm-hmm. And that's good, that we want that from you. But we also want you to bring in a bit of compassion for yourself, to where your inner conversation with yourself is not whipping you and you're walking along like the floorboards with glass, just scraping yourself along the edges, and like that's masochism, pain. We cause ourselves pain internally. And why do we do that to ourselves? I honestly don't know. It's a pattern that's been built into our heritage. And for some reason, like that part of us has to go. And the opposite side of having that mental toughness is having the mental clarity, really. And to be clear means you can think with intent and start to manifest things in the ways you want to create your reality. And that's really important to realize. And that takes some compassion and nurturing and rest. And these are all feminine qualities. So you have to balance those things. And when you come home, you're able to be present, and you're able to support your spouse and be able to be there and support, in so many different ways. I'm being taught by a 9-year-old little girl in my home. She teaches me how to be soft with her. I can't act that way. She's becoming one of my greatest teachers, to be honest. Every single day, like I am interacting with her, I'm learning more. And it's just softening my spirit in so many different ways. I just know I was just like a bully growing up, and I can't act that way with her, and just like shooting the shit with my friends and talking shit all the time. Like, I can't do that with her, I have fun talking shit, it's fun. It's the banter. It's a part of our culture too in the firehouse, but I honestly can't bring that home. There's a quality that I have to inspire in myself to change the way I do things. And I think when what you're talking about, it's like, damn, what were you talking about again?
Oh man,
I know it was something important.
It was something important.
Oh, you're talking about the firehouse and like being this, you're being indifferent, right, to the crew, but that authenticity, that takes courage, and people are afraid to do that because they want to be liked. But what does that prove to yourself if you're not being yourself? You're losing yourself. Mm-hmm. And that comes back to that question: who are you? Do you know? And it's like, people pleasing is a huge mask, because who are you trying to please? Obviously not yourself. Mm-hmm. So, and that goes deeper into why do you have that pattern? People pleasing is a huge factor in and losing yourself, and you've sabotaged your own identity because you want to have this approval from other people. And if you can go back into that concept of what we were talking about, of going into your knowing, when you go into your knowing of yourself, the truest pieces of yourself, that absolute inner knowing, that trust factor, you don't need approval from anyone else. You can understand that people may not agree with you or may not like you, but that's okay. But internally, you have a knowing sense that you resonate with, and you manifest within your life, and that quiet confidence will expand beyond. And people will see that and admire it, and the people who are jealous won't like that. And that'll really, really ruffle some feathers. But obviously there is a point of respect with that too. You respect other people, obviously. And the leaders who you may not agree with, you have to respect them. And that's part of our job too. There's a pecking order sometimes, and you have to work within that realms, but also be true to yourself. And there's an ebb and flow with that concept, but teaching a younger member who's just getting on this job, to teach them that to trust themselves is a huge piece of them being successful in their career, and not having someone take their power away. Holding that for yourself is a big deal, man. So I don't know, brother. You have anything else you want to say? We're gonna close here in a sec.
Yeah, I encourage anyone and everyone to take that step towards growth, whatever it looks like. Learn who you are and how to fill your cup.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on, Dan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And in the words of Larry June, one of my favorite rappers, he says, in order to grow, you got to let go. So do that, let go of the false identities. And just to close here, thank you for listening. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you can go on Spotify, Apple, all of our platforms, YouTube now, just send us some comments and interact with Grablives and give some stars. Really feel inspired when people reach out to share their thoughts on everything going on in their personal lives, and Grablives is here to support that in every way. As far as our sponsor and our team member, Frontline Behavioral Wellness, you could reach out to them, and they are a great asset and wanting to find help and treatment for anything, really. And they just really support any type of mental health issues, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and everything is done through a confidential hotline that they have 24/7. And if you want to reach out to them, their number is 661-877-7241. And on top of that, you can go to acerahealth.com and see what things they offer. One of their facilities, Acera, is in Orange County. If you're located out there, they have a bunch of stuff that they do that's just super innovative and rad, the way they support mental health for first responders. So it's designed for that. Thank you for listening, and take care.